A story about redemption, family, and the love that changes everything. The child's breathing was the first thing Julian Corleone heard when he slid into the back seat of his Bentley, soft, terrified, rabbit-quick. His hand froze on the door handle. Every instinct screamed danger. Kidnapping attempt, assassination setup, corporate espionage gone amateur. In his world, surprises meant threats, and threats meant elimination. But then he saw the teddy bear. One glassy eye hung by a thread. Stuffing leaked from a torn seam at its neck. The thing looked like it had survived a war, and maybe it had. The small fingers clutching it were dirt-smudged, trembling, attached to a boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old, curled behind the driver's seat like a secret that had finally been discovered. "Don't move," Julian said, his voice the same cold blade he used in boardrooms to slice through competitors. His driver, Chun, appeared at the window, face pale, hand already reaching for his phone, probably to call security, maybe the police. The boy's eyes, dark, enormous, drowning in something Julian couldn't name, locked onto his. "Please." The word came out broken. "Please don't make me go back." Julian's blood turned to ice water. "Back where?" "Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm so glad you're here with me today for this story that's been burning in my heart to share with you. Before we dive deeper into Julian's world, and trust me, it's about to get intense, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And listen, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are we waiting for? This story has 9 parts of pure emotional roller coaster, and you don't want to miss a single moment. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's take this journey together. Now, let's get back to that car because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. "Back where?" Julian repeated, and hated how his voice had shifted. Less knife, more question mark. The boy flinched anyway. His free hand, the one not death-gripping that mutilated bear, moved to his ribs, protective, and Julian saw the bruise blooming purple beneath the torn sleeve of a shirt that might have once been white. "The shelter," the boy whispered. "But they'll send me to another foster home, and I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't do it again." Julian's mind raced through calculations. Liability, media exposure, legal ramifications. This was a PR nightmare wrapped in torn clothing and desperation. Chun was already dialing. Julian could see the screen's glow reflected in the window. "Sir, I'm calling." "Don't." The word cut through the evening air like a guillotine. Chun's finger hovered over the phone, confusion rippling across his features. In 10 years of service, Julian had never hesitated on a decision. Never wavered. Never shown mercy to anything that threatened his empire or his evening schedule. But something about those eyes. "What's your name?" Julian heard himself ask. The boy's chin lifted slightly, defiance struggling against terror.
"Luke."
"Luke Skywalker." Despite everything, Julian's mouth twitched. "Your parents named you after Star Wars?" "My mom loved the movies." Past tense. The words landed like stones in still water. She said Luke was a hero who came from nothing and saved everybody. Came from nothing. Julian knew about coming from nothing. He'd clawed his way out of a Brooklyn tenement with nothing but rage and ambition, transforming himself into one of New York's most feared real estate developers. He'd built his fortune on demolition, tearing down the old, the weak, the unprofitable, replacing it with steel and glass monuments to progress. He'd made billions by not looking back. "How did you get in my car, Luke?" The boy's eyes dropped to the bear. His thumb traced the torn seam with a gentleness that made Julian's chest constrict in an unfamiliar way. "I've been following you," Luke said quietly. "For 3 days. Since you signed the papers." "What papers?" "The ones that knocked down my building." Luke's voice was steady now, too steady for a 7-year-old. Too steady for someone whose world had literally collapsed. "Riverside Apartments on Delancey Street. You signed them on Monday. The wrecking crew came on Tuesday. My foster mom had to work, so I was supposed to be at school, but I was sick, and I was hiding in the closet with Mr. Bear when the walls started shaking." The air in the Bentley became suffocating. Julian remembered Riverside. Of course he remembered. 12-story brick monstrosity, built in the 60s, falling apart, taking up premium waterfront real estate. The residents had been relocated, proper notice given, legal requirements met, generous compensation packages offered. His lawyers had assured him every I was dotted, every T crossed. But lawyers didn't mention 7-year-olds hiding in closets with teddy bears. You were in the building during demolition? The words came out strangled. Luke nodded. A man in an orange vest found me. He was really mad. He said they'd checked, but I was good at hiding. My foster mom came and got me, but we didn't have anywhere to go because the new apartment isn't ready yet. So she took me to the shelter and said it was just temporary, but he stopped, swallowed hard. But I heard her on the phone. She told someone she can't take care of me anymore. That I'm too much trouble. That she's done. Julian should have felt nothing. He'd heard worse stories. Hell, he'd lived through worse. The world was brutal, and sentiment was a luxury for people who couldn't afford to be sharks. But looking at this boy, this tiny human who'd nearly been crushed by his ambition, who'd spent 3 days tracking him down with nothing but a dying stuffed animal and a desperate plan, something ancient and rusted shifted in Julian's chest. So you found me, Julian said slowly. And you what? Thought I'd help you. Luke's expression hardened in a way that made him look decades older. I thought you should know. That's all. I thought the man who destroyed my home should have to look at what he did. The accusation hung between them like smoke from a gun. Chen's phone buzzed. Probably security, wondering why Julian's car hadn't moved in 10 minutes. Probably concerned about the suspicious delay. In moments, they'd swarm the vehicle, and Luke would disappear into the system, another casualty of progress, another number in a file that Julian would never have to think about again. It would be so easy.
So clean.
Julian looked at the boy. Really looked. Saw the defiant tilt of his chin fighting against the trembling of his lower lip. Saw the dirt under his fingernails and the hollow spaces in his cheeks that spoke of too many missed meals. Saw the way he held that bear like it was the only solid thing in a world made of quicksand. And Julian saw something else, something that made his blood run cold. He saw himself at 7 years old, hiding in a closet while his mother's latest boyfriend raged outside, clutching his own stuffed animal, praying to become invisible. Mr. Corleone? Chen's voice was tight with worry. What do you want me to do? Julian had built an empire on quick decisions and ruthless pragmatism. He'd never second-guessed himself. Never looked back. Never let emotion contaminate strategy. But as he stared at Luke Skywalker, the boy his ambition had nearly killed, something fractured inside him. What kind of man destroys a child's world before breakfast and doesn't even know it? The answer terrified him. Drive us home, Julian said quietly. Chen's reflection in the rear-view mirror showed pure shock. Sir, you heard me. We're taking Luke home. But that's an order, Chen. Luke's eyes went wide, the teddy bear falling slack in his grip. What? Julian met the boy's gaze and saw his own confusion mirrored there. He had no idea what he was doing. No plan.
No endgame.
He only knew that if he let this child disappear back into the machinery of the system, he'd become the monster he'd spent 30 years pretending he wasn't. You wanted me to see what I'd done, Julian said, his voice rough with something that might have been shame. Consider your point made. Now, let's go figure out what happens next. As Chen pulled the Bentley into traffic, Julian caught sight of his own reflection in the window, a stranger wearing his $1,000 suit, making decisions that would either save him or destroy everything he'd built. Behind him, Luke Skywalker clutched his dying bear and stared at the man who demolished his world. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the moment everything changed. This was the moment Julian Corleone stopped being a billionaire and started learning how to be human. Asterisk and the secrets they'd both been running from? They were just beginning to surface. Asterisk. Julian's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Corleone Tower, a monument to ego and isolation that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Manhattan like a kingdom laid at his feet. Everything was marble, steel, and glass. Clean lines. Cold surfaces.
No photographs. No color.
No evidence that a human being actually lived there. Luke stood in the entrance, still clutching Mr. Bear, and looked impossibly small against the vast emptiness. "This is where you live." The boy's voice echoed in the cavernous space. "Yes. It looks like a museum." Julian's jaw tightened. "It's efficient. It's lonely." The words hit harder than they should have. Julian turned away, moving toward the kitchen. Not that he ever cooked, but the liquor cabinet was there, and he suddenly needed something to do with his hands. "You must be hungry." Luke didn't answer. He was standing in front of the window wall, staring out at the city lights with an expression that made Julian's chest ache. The boy looked like he was searching for something in all that glittering darkness. Maybe trying to find where his home used to be. "I can see the river from here," Luke said softly. "We used to watch the boats. My mom and me. She'd make up stories about where they were going. Adventure stories. She said someday we'd get on one of those boats and sail away to somewhere better." Julian's hand froze on the bourbon bottle. "Your mother
Died.
2 years ago." Luke's reflection in the window showed no tears, just a terrible adult acceptance. "Cancer. They tried, but—" He shrugged, and the gesture was so heartbreaking in its practiced casualness that Julian had to look away. "After that, I went into the system. I've had 5 foster homes. This last one was the longest. Almost 8 months. I thought maybe—" He stopped. "Doesn't matter what I thought." Julian abandoned the bourbon and moved closer, careful not to crowd the boy. Up close, he could see more details he'd missed in the car. The 2 short sleeves that exposed bony wrists, the shoes held together with duct tape, the careful way Luke held himself, like someone used to making himself small and unnoticed. "What about your father?" "Never met him. Mom said he was a soldier who died before I was born. But I think she made that up to make me feel better." Luke turned from the window, those dark eyes finding Julian's with unsettling directness. "Are you going to call CPS?" The question hung between them like a blade. Julian should say yes. Every rational cell in his body screamed yes. He was a 42-year-old bachelor with 0 experience with children, a ruthless reputation, and enemies who'd weaponize this situation in a heartbeat. Taking in a random foster child wasn't just impulsive, it was insane. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was, "Are you going to run if I do?" Luke's chin lifted. "Yes." "Where would you go?" "Anywhere but back." The simple determination in those words, the absolute certainty that anywhere, even the streets, was better than the system, cracked something fundamental in Julian's carefully constructed armor. He thought about the boy he'd been. The one who'd learned to pick locks by age 8, so he could escape when things got bad. The one who'd slept in subway stations and eaten from dumpsters behind restaurants. The one who'd sworn that if he ever clawed his way out of poverty, he'd never look back, never be weak, never let anyone close enough to hurt him. He'd kept that promise for 30 years. Until tonight. "I'm not calling anyone," Julian heard himself say. "Not yet. But we need ground rules." Luke's eyes went wide with shock and something that might have been hope. "Really? Don't make me regret this." Julian moved to the kitchen island, putting solid marble between them because the emotion in the boy's face was too much, too raw. "First rule, honesty. You lie to me, we're done. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Second, you do what I say when I say it. I don't have time for arguments." "Okay." "Third, this is temporary." "I'm not." He stopped, struggling with words that felt foreign in his mouth. "I'm not your father. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to figure this out. We both are." Luke nodded slowly. "What do I call you?" The question surprised him. "What do you want to call me?" "Mr. Corleone feels weird. Like you're my teacher or something." Despite everything, Julian almost smiled. "Julian is fine." "Julian." Luke tested the name, rolling it around like an unfamiliar candy. "Okay. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why are you doing this?" "You don't know me." "And I." He looked down at Mr. Bear, fingers tracing that torn seam again. "I kinda blamed you for everything. I was really mad at you. You should be mad at me." The words came out harsher than intended. I destroyed your home. I nearly got you killed. The fact that it was legal doesn't make it right. But you didn't know I was there. I should have known. Julian grabbed 2 glasses, filled them with water, not bourbon, not now. I should have asked more questions. Made sure every resident was accounted for. Checked more carefully. But I was too busy looking at profit margins and construction timelines to think about the actual people living there. He carried the glasses over, handed one to Luke. Their fingers brushed, and Julian was struck by how small the boy's hand was. How fragile. Before we continue, I just want to say, you all in the comments have been absolutely incredible. The support and love you show for these stories keeps me going. If this story is touching your heart, if you're feeling what I'm feeling as I write this, do me a favor and drop a heart emoji below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We're building something special here, a community that believes in second chances and redemption. Okay, back to Julian and Luke, because things are about to get complicated. Asterisk, asterisk. Luke sipped his water, never breaking eye contact. My foster mom, Mrs. Chun, not your driver, different Chun, she used to say that rich people don't care about us. That we're just in the way. Obstacles to their money. She wasn't wrong. The brutal honesty made Luke blink. But you brought me here. I don't know why I did that. Julian leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. I've spent my entire adult life believing that sentiment is weakness. That compassion is a luxury I can't afford. That the only way to survive is to be harder than everyone else. What changed? You did. You and that damn bear. Julian gestured at the toy. You looked at me like I was supposed to be better than what I am. And for the first time in 30 years, I was ashamed. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Julian had never said those words out loud. Had never allowed himself to feel shame. It was counterproductive, inefficient, a waste of energy better spent on forward momentum. But looking at Luke, he felt it now. A crushing weight of all the people he displaced, all the homes he demolished, all the lives he disrupted in his relentless pursuit of more. My mom used to say that shame is just love turned inside out, Luke said quietly. She said it means you care enough to want to be better. Your mother sounds like she was wise. She was. Luke's voice cracked slightly. She was the best person I ever knew. Even when we didn't have money for food, she'd make it fun. We'd have adventure dinners where we'd imagine eating fancy food while we shared a can of soup. She made everything feel like magic. Julian's throat constricted. He'd never had that. His mother had loved him. He knew that intellectually, but she'd been too broken by life, too drowned in addiction and bad men to make anything feel like magic. His childhood had been survival, not adventure. What happened to Mr. Bear's eye? He asked, needing to shift away from the emotional quicksand he was sinking into. Luke held up the bear, studying it with scientific seriousness. Ripped off in foster home number 3. There was this older kid, Tyler. He didn't like me. Said I was too quiet, too weird. He took Mr. Bear and threw him down the stairs. The eye came off when he hit the bottom. What did you do? A smile flickered across Luke's face, small but fierce. I waited until Tyler was asleep, then I put slime in his favorite sneakers. He never figured out it was me. Despite himself, Julian laughed. The sound felt foreign in his chest, rusty from disuse. Revenge through slime. Strategic. Mom always said being smart was better than being strong. She was right about that too. They fell into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Julian found himself studying the boy, really looking at him. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, there was something remarkable about Luke. A resilience, an intelligence, a core of steel wrapped in 7-year-old vulnerability. You're not what I expected, Julian admitted. What did you expect? I don't know. Tears, maybe. Hysteria. Begging. Luke's expression grew serious. I learned not to cry a long time ago. Crying doesn't change anything. It just makes people uncomfortable, and then they send you away faster. The matter-of-fact delivery of that statement, the casual acceptance of such a terrible truth, made Julian want to punch something. Or someone. Preferably every adult who taught this child that his tears were inconvenient. You can cry here, Julian said roughly. If you need to. I won't send you away. Luke looked at him for a long moment, searching for something. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. Are you tired?
Yeah.
But Luke hesitated. I don't want to sleep yet. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the building falling, the walls shaking. I keep thinking about what would have happened if that construction guy hadn't found me. Julian's blood ran cold. How long were you trapped? Maybe an hour? Felt longer. The closet I was hiding in, the walls caved in around it, but they didn't collapse on me. It was dark and loud, and I thought. He stopped, swallowed hard. I thought that was it, that I was going to die like my mom did, alone and scared.
Jesus.
The word escaped before Julian could stop it. He moved without thinking, closing the distance between them, and did something he hadn't done in years. He reached out and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. You're not alone anymore, and you're not going to die. I promise you that. Luke looked up at him, and for the first time since climbing into that Bentley, tears gathered in his eyes. Why are you being nice to me? I don't know, Julian admitted, but I'm going to figure it out. The tears spilled over, silent tracks down dirty cheeks. Luke didn't sob or wail. He just cried with the quiet resignation of someone who'd learned tears changed nothing. But he didn't pull away from Julian's hand either. And Julian, who hadn't touched another person with gentleness in more years than he could count, found himself pulling the boy closer, awkward and uncertain, until Luke's face was pressed against his expensive suit jacket and small shoulders were shaking with silent sobs. It's okay, Julian heard himself murmur. I've got you. You're safe now. The words felt like lies. He didn't know how to keep anyone safe. Didn't know how to be what this child needed.
Didn't even know why he was trying.
But holding Luke while he cried, feeling the desperate, clinging grip of small hands fisting in his jacket, something ancient and frozen in Julian's chest began to thaw. And for the first time in 30 years, he wondered if maybe he'd been wrong about sentiment being weakness. Maybe, just maybe, it was the only thing that made you strong enough to actually matter. Julian woke at 5:47 a.m. to the sound of screaming. He bolted upright, heart hammering, instinct screaming threat, until he remembered.
The boy. Luke.
He'd put him in the guest room after he'd finally cried himself into exhausted sleep around midnight. Julian grabbed his phone and ran down the hall, throwing open the guest room door to find Luke thrashing in the bed, trapped in a nightmare, small hands clawing at invisible walls. The building, Mom. I can't find you, it's falling. Luke. Julian moved to the bed, uncertain, his hands hovering uselessly. Wake up. You're safe. The boy's eyes snapped open, wild and unseeing. For a heartbeat, he didn't recognize Julian, just stared at him with pure animal terror. It's me, Julian said quietly. Julian. You're in my penthouse. You're safe. Recognition slowly filtered through the panic. Luke's breathing gradually slowed, though his small body still trembled.
Sorry.
I have nightmares. A lot. Don't apologize. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. You've been through hell. Nightmares are normal. They're getting worse since. Luke didn't finish.
Didn't need to.
Julian's jaw clenched. One more thing to add to his growing list of damage done. Do you want to talk about it?
No.
Luke pulled the covers up to his chin, and Julian realized the boy was wearing one of his t-shirts as a makeshift nightgown. It swallowed him completely. What time is it? Almost 6. You're awake early. I don't sleep much. Julian stood, restless energy driving him toward the window. The city was beginning to wake. Delivery trucks, early commuters, the perpetual motion of New York that never truly stopped. I have a meeting at 8. With my board. Oh. Luke's voice went small. Are you going to? I mean, do I have to? You're not going anywhere. The words came out more forcefully than intended. I'll have my assistant arrange for some clothes and food. You'll stay here. Alone. The single word, the thread of fear woven through it, made Julian pause. He turned back to find Luke sitting up, Mr. Bear clutched against his chest, eyes too wide and too vulnerable. I'll have Chin stay with you. He's trustworthy. What if someone comes? What if they find out I'm here? Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, Victoria Blake flashing across the screen. He ignored it. His attorney could wait. No one knows you're here except Chen, and he won't tell anyone. Julian moved back to the bed, crouched down so they were eye level. I need you to trust me, Luke.
Can you do that?
Luke studied him with those two old eyes. I want to, but everyone always leaves. They say they won't, but they do. The quiet devastation in that statement hit Julian like a physical blow. He understood it, had lived it. Every foster home, every temporary guardian, every person who'd promised his mother they'd help and then vanished when things got hard. I'm not leaving, Julian said, and meant it. I have to go to this meeting because if I don't, people will ask questions. But I'm coming back. I promise. Promises break. Mine don't. He stood, pulling out his phone.
Here.
Take this. Luke stared at the device like Julian had just handed him the nuclear codes. This is a really expensive phone. It's my personal line. I'm the only contact programmed in. If you need me for any reason, you call, and I'll answer. Doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing. Slowly, reverently, Luke took the phone. Really? Really? Julian checked his watch, 6:02 a.m. He needed to shower, dress, prepare for what would likely be the most challenging board meeting of his career. But leaving Luke felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. There's food in the kitchen. Chun will be here by 7. And Luke. Yeah. Don't answer the door for anyone. Not even if they say they're from building security. Understood? Something flickered in Luke's expression. Fear or gratitude or both. Okay. Julian made it to the door before Luke's voice stopped him. Julian? Yes. Thank you. For not sending me back. The words lodged in Julian's throat like broken glass. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and left before he did something stupid like promise this child things he had no business promising. The Corleone Tower boardroom occupied the 48th floor, all glass and steel and calculated intimidation. 18 executives sat around the obsidian table, each one a shark Julian had personally selected for their ruthlessness. His CFO, Richard Dawson, was already presenting quarterly projections when Julian arrived 7 minutes late, practically unheard of. Glad you could join us, Richard said dryly. Julian took his seat at the head of the table without apology. Continue. But he couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting to Luke alone in his penthouse, to the nightmares, to the way those small hands had clutched his phone like a lifeline. The Riverside project is tracking ahead of schedule, Richard was saying. Demo completed Monday, foundation work begins next week. We're looking at a 22% profit increase over initial projections. Julian's blood turned cold. Stop. The room went silent. Sir? Richard's confusion was evident. The Riverside demolition. Tell me about the resident relocation process. Richard exchanged glances with Amanda Hayes, their legal counsel. All protocols were followed. Every resident received 60 days' notice, relocation assistance, and compensation packages that exceeded legal requirements. Every resident was accounted for? Of course. We had sign-offs from all 48 units. And you verified those sign-offs personally? Richard's expression shifted, confusion giving way to defensiveness. That's what we pay the relocation team for, Julian. They handle. I didn't ask what the team handled. I asked if you verified. But the team confirmed. A 7-year-old boy was in that building when the wrecking crew arrived. Julian's voice was ice. He was hiding in a closet. He was nearly killed because someone didn't do their job. The room erupted in controlled panic, executives speaking over each other, legal counsel already pulling up files on tablets, Richard's face draining of color. That's impossible, Amanda said sharply. We had confirmation from every unit. Clearly your confirmations were insufficient. Julian stood, hands flat on the table, his boardroom predator instincts taking over. I want a complete audit of the Riverside relocation. Every document, every sign-off, every confirmation call. I want to know exactly how a child slipped through our process. Julian, if this gets out, Amanda started. It won't, because we're going to handle it quietly and thoroughly. He turned to Richard. What other demo projects do we have in progress?
3.
Hudson Street, the Bowery site, and halt them all. The room went nuclear quiet. Excuse me? Richard's voice climbed an octave. Julian, we have contracts, timelines, investors. I don't care. Halt everything until we can guarantee, absolutely guarantee, that every building is empty. I want new protocols. Personal verification. Multiple checks. Whatever it takes. Do you have any idea what this will cost us? Julian met Richard's eyes with the same cold fury that had built his empire. Less than a child's life. Do you have a problem with that? Richard sat down hard. No, sir.
Good.
Amanda, I want those new protocols on my desk by end of day tomorrow. Richard, start calling investors. Explain that we're implementing enhanced safety measures. Spin it as corporate responsibility. And if they pull out, then they pull out. Julian moved toward the door, done with this conversation. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Meeting adjourned. He was halfway to the elevator when a voice stopped him, female, sharp as crystal, tinged with British accent. That was quite the performance. Julian turned to find a woman leaning against the corridor wall, late 30s, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a charcoal suit that screamed expensive and practical in equal measure. He didn't recognize her, which immediately set off alarms. Who are you, and how did you get past security? She pushed off the wall, extending a hand. Dr. Sarah Connor. Child Services. And before you panic, I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to prevent them. Julian's blood turned to ice water. I don't know what you're. Julian Corleone, age 42, CEO of Corleone Development, net worth approximately $3.2 billion. Her smile was professional but not unkind. Recently made some unusual purchases, children's clothing, toys, basic medical supplies. All delivered to your residence. And then there's the matter of your driver calling in a suspicious report last night about a child in your vehicle. A report that mysteriously disappeared from the system before anyone could follow up. Oh, you guys are not going to believe what happens next. I literally gasped when I wrote this twist. Drop a comment below telling me your predictions. Are you Team Sarah or Team Suspicious? And seriously, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This story is about to get absolutely wild. Asterisk, asterisk. Julian's mind raced through options. Denial, aggression, legal threats. But something about the way Dr. Connor was looking at him, steady, assessing, but not hostile, made him pause. You said you're here to prevent problems. I am. Then why ambush me in my office? Because you wouldn't have taken my call. She gestured to a nearby conference room. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Every instinct screamed danger. Child Services meant exposure, investigation, losing Luke before he'd even figured out what Luke meant to him. But running made him look guilty, and Julian hadn't built an empire by running. 3 minutes, he said curtly, and led her into the conference room. Sarah closed the door, then surprised him by smiling. Genuinely this time. You really brought him home with you. I wasn't sure I believed it until I saw your face just now. How did you find out?
I'm good at my job.
And before you lawyer up and start making threats, you should know I'm not here in an official capacity. Consider this off the record. Julian's eyes narrowed. Child Services doesn't do off the record. They do when the social worker in question has been trying to reform the system for 10 years and sees an opportunity for something unprecedented. She leaned against the conference table, suddenly less bureaucrat and more human. I know Luke Skywalker. I've been his caseworker for the past 8 months. I know about his mother, his nightmare foster placements, his trauma. And I know he ran away yesterday afternoon. So you're here to take him back. Actually, no. I'm here to ask you a question. She crossed her arms. Do you want to keep him? The question caught Julian completely off guard. What? It's not complicated, Mr. Corleone. Do you want to keep Luke? Because if you do, if this isn't some guilt-driven impulse that'll fade in a week, I might be able to help you. Julian stared at this woman who'd appeared in his life like a beautiful complication. Why would you help me?
You don't know me.
No, but I know Luke. And I know the system. That boy has been through 5 foster homes in 2 years. He's smart, resilient, and utterly convinced that he's unlovable. Every placement has failed because foster parents want easy children. Grateful children. Luke is neither of those things. He's 7 years old. He shouldn't have to be grateful for basic care. Sarah's expression softened. Most people don't see it that way. But you do. Which makes me think you might actually give a damn. I nearly killed him. Not intentionally. And the fact that you're tearing apart your company's protocols because of it tells me something important. You have a conscience. That's rarer than you'd think in my line of work. Julian moved to the window, needing distance from the intensity of her gaze. Below, the city sprawled out like a game board, buildings he'd constructed, deals he'd closed, victories he'd won. None of it felt important anymore. I don't know how to take care of a child, he admitted. I don't know the first thing about being a father. Neither do most people when they start. They learn. What if I fail him? What if I'm just another placement that doesn't work out? Then at least you tried. Sarah joined him at the window, her reflection appearing beside his in the glass. The system will fail him, Mr. Corleone. I guarantee it. He'll age out at 18 with no family, no support system, no one who remembers his mother-told adventure stories. He'll become a statistic. But you...
She paused.
You could change that. What would I have to do? Legally? Apply to become a foster parent. Go through training, home studies, background checks. It takes months, usually. But... She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a folder. I've been working on emergency placement protocols. For situations where a child is in immediate danger or has formed an attachment to a potential guardian. If you're serious, truly serious, I can fast-track this. Temporary emergency custody while we work through the official process. Julian turned to face her fully. And if I say yes? If I do this? What happens to you? What do you mean? You're breaking protocol by being here. Offering me this deal. If it blows up, your career is over. Sarah's smile turned wistful. I became a social worker to help children, Mr. Corleone. Somewhere along the way, I got buried in paperwork and regulations and a system that's designed to protect itself more than the kids it's supposed to serve. Luke is special. He deserves better than what I can give him through normal channels. She met his eyes steadily. So yes, I'm risking my career. But some things are worth the risk. Julian studied her, really looked at her for the first time. Beneath the professional armor, he saw the same exhausted idealism he felt stirring in himself. The same desperate need to believe that one person could actually make a difference. Why do you care so much about him specifically? Because he reminds me of my brother. Her voice went quiet. Same age when he entered foster care. Same intelligence, same resilience, same broken heart. He didn't make it. Aged out, fell through the cracks, died of an overdose at 23. She blinked hard. I see my brother every time I look at Luke. And I'm not letting history repeat itself. The raw honesty in her admission created an unexpected connection between them. Two people carrying ghosts, trying to save a boy who represented all the children they'd failed to save before. What do I need to do? Julian asked. Sarah opened the folder, pulled out papers. Sign these. Temporary emergency custody, valid for 60 days while we complete the foster parent certification process. You'll need to attend parenting classes, undergo psychological evaluation, submit to home inspections. I'll do whatever it takes. She paused, pen hovering over the document. You're sure? Because once you sign this, you're legally responsible for him. If you change your mind, if it gets hard, and it will get hard, you can't just give him back like he's a pet you decided you don't want. I'm not going to change my mind. How do you know? Julian thought about Luke crying into his jacket last night, about the way the boy held that dying teddy bear, about the nightmares and the forced resilience, and the terrible certainty that everyone leaves. Because I know what it's like to be him, Julian said quietly. And I know what it's like to believe you're not worth saving. I'm not letting another child grow up believing that lie. Sarah's eyes shimmered with something that might have been tears. Then sign here, Mr. Corleone. And welcome to the hardest, most important thing you'll ever do. Julian took the pen and signed his name. Bold, decisive, irrevocable. As the ink dried, his phone buzzed with a text from Luke. Chin fell asleep.
I'm bored.
When are you coming back? Julian smiled, an expression that felt foreign on his face, but surprisingly natural. I need to get back, he told Sarah. Of course. I'll file these immediately and be in touch tomorrow about next steps. She hesitated at the door. Mr. Corleone? For what it's worth, I think you're going to be good at this. Why? Because you're terrified. The ones who think it's easy are the ones who fail. After she left, Julian stood alone in the conference room, staring at the signed papers that had just changed his entire life. Somewhere in his penthouse, a 7-year-old boy was waiting for him. A boy who was now legally his responsibility.
His to protect.
His to fail. His to save. Julian took a breath, straightened his tie, and headed home to start figuring out how to do the impossible, become someone worth believing in. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Julian discovered that raising a traumatized 7-year-old was exponentially harder than running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. For one thing, board members didn't hide under tables during thunderstorms. Luke. Julian crouched beside the dining table, phone in one hand, half-eaten takeout container in the other. Rain hammered against the windows, a spring storm that had rolled in without warning. You need to come out. The thunder can't hurt you. I know that. Luke's voice was muffled, small. But my brain doesn't know that. Julian set down his phone and food, then did something that would have shocked his former self. He crawled under the table. The space was cramped, awkward for a 6'2" man in a custom suit. But Luke was there, wedged into the corner with Mr. Bear, his face pressed against his knees. Storms remind you of the building, Julian said. Not a question. Luke nodded. The walls shook like this. Before they fell. Julian's chest tightened. 3 weeks, and the nightmares were getting worse, not better. Luke woke screaming almost every night. He flinched at loud noises. He hoarded food in his room like he expected to starve. And he watched Julian constantly, waiting. Julian realized, for the moment when Julian would decide, he was too much trouble. I used to hide during storms too, Julian admitted. When I was your age. There was a closet in our apartment, barely big enough for me, and a box of my mother's old clothes. I'd crawl in there when things got bad and pretend I was somewhere else. Luke lifted his head slightly. Where did you pretend to be?
Space.
Like Luke Skywalker. Julian offered a small smile. I'd imagine I was on a starship, flying away from everything that scared me. Did it help? Not really. But it made me feel less alone. Julian shifted, his back already protesting the confined space. What if we tried something different? Instead of hiding from the storm, what if we watched it together? Watched it? Come on. Julian backed out from under the table, then extended a hand. Luke stared at it for a long moment before slowly reaching out. His small hand disappeared into Julian's larger one, and Julian felt that now familiar ache in his chest, the one that appeared whenever he was reminded how fragile this child was. He led Luke to the window wall, where lightning fractured the sky over Manhattan. The city looked different in the storm, vulnerable, almost beautiful in its chaos. My mom and I used to count, Luke said quietly, between the lightning and thunder. She said it tells you how far away the storm is. Smart. Julian crouched beside him. Wanna try? They counted through 3 lightning strikes, Luke's voice gaining confidence each time. By the 4th, he was pressed against Julian's side, no longer trembling. It's kind of pretty, Luke admitted. When you're not alone. Yeah, Julian agreed. It is. His phone buzzed, Sarah, according to the screen. She'd been checking in daily, sometimes more. Professional oversight, she claimed, but her texts had started including personal questions. Asterisk, how's he sleeping? Did he eat breakfast? You surviving? Asterisk. Can we do a home visit tomorrow? Need to document progress for the court. Julian typed back. Fine.
What time?
2 p.m.
And Julian?
Don't clean up too much. They need to see he actually lives there. Luke was reading over his shoulder. Is that Sarah?
Yes.
She's coming by tomorrow. I like her. Luke traced a raindrop's path down the glass. She doesn't talk to me like I'm stupid. And she brought me that Spider-Man book last week.
She had.
Along with a dinosaur encyclopedia, new shoes, and a patient smile that made Julian's chest do complicated things he wasn't ready to examine. She's good at her job, Julian said carefully. Do you like her? The question caught him off guard. What? I saw you smile when her name came up on your phone. Luke's expression was far too knowing for 7 years old. You don't smile very much. But you smiled for her. Julian stood abruptly, suddenly uncomfortable. It's almost bedtime. I'm not tired. Luke. Can I ask you something first? Luke turned from the window, Mr. Bear tucked under his arm. Why don't you have any pictures? What? Pictures.
Of people.
Your apartment has paintings and stuff, but no photos. Don't you have a family? The innocent question landed like a grenade. Julian moved to the kitchen, needing distance, needing something to do with his hands.
No.
I don't. What happened to them? My mother died when I was 17. Overdose. I never knew my father. The words came out flat, clinical, facts stated without emotion because emotion meant remembering, and remembering meant pain. After she died, I was on my own. That's when you were in foster care?
No.
I aged out before they could catch me. Lived on the streets for a while. Then I got my GED, talked my way into a construction job, and started learning the business from the ground up. Julian poured himself water he didn't want. I swore I'd never be poor again. Never be powerless again. So I built this. He gestured at the penthouse. All of this. To prove I didn't need anyone. Luke was quiet for a moment. Then, were you lonely? The question pierced through Julian's armor like a blade. Yes, he admitted. I was very lonely. You don't have to be anymore. Luke moved closer, his voice gentle in a way that made Julian's throat constrict. You have me now. If you want. Julian looked down at this child who'd invaded his carefully controlled life and destroyed every defense he'd spent 30 years building. I want, he said roughly. I very much want. Luke smiled, a real one, not the careful, guarded expressions Julian had seen before.
Good.
Because I want you too. The next afternoon, Sarah arrived exactly at 2 p.m. wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual professional attire. She looked younger, softer, and Julian found himself staring before he could stop himself. Casual Friday? He asked. Home visits aren't interrogations, Julian. I'm here as a friend, not an auditor. She stepped inside, and her eyes immediately found Luke sprawling on the couch with his dinosaur book. Hey, buddy. Sarah. Luke launched himself at her, and she caught him easily, laughing as he chattered about the Spinosaurus he'd been reading about. Julian watched them together, the easy affection, the genuine warmth, and felt something twist in his chest. This was what Luke needed. Someone who knew how to comfort a child. Someone who didn't have to Google how to cook chicken nuggets at midnight because they'd never made a meal for anyone but themselves. Julian. Sarah's voice pulled him from his thoughts. You okay?
Fine.
Just thinking. She set Luke down, ruffled his hair. Why don't you show me your room? I bet it's pretty cool. As Luke dragged her down the hall, Julian followed at a distance. The guest room had transformed over 3 weeks, no longer the sterile space it had been. Now there were books scattered on the floor, drawings taped to the walls, a pile of stuffed animals accumulating in the corner thanks to Sarah's frequent gifts. I made this one. Luke held up a crayon drawing, crude but heartfelt. 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. That's me and Julian. We're at the park. Sarah studied it seriously. It's beautiful, Luke. Have you been to the park? Not yet. But Julian promised we'd go this weekend. When it's not raining. Sarah glanced at Julian, one eyebrow raised. He shrugged, feeling oddly defensive. He needs fresh air. The pediatrician said exercise helps with anxiety. You took him to a pediatrician? Of course I did. Full checkup, vaccinations, dental screening. Julian pulled out his phone, showed her the organized folder of medical records. He was malnourished and anemic. We're working on that. And I hired a child therapist, Dr. Elizabeth Miller. She specializes in trauma. Sarah's expression softened into something that made Julian's pulse stutter. You've been busy. I told you I was serious. I know, but seeing it. She touched the drawing gently. This is good work, Julian. Really good. Luke beamed. He's the best. He lets me stay up late on weekends, and he reads to me every night, and yesterday he canceled a meeting because I had a nightmare and didn't want him to leave. Julian felt his face heat. It wasn't an important meeting. It was with the mayor, Sarah said, her smile turning knowing. The mayor can reschedule. Okay, I'm calling it Julian Corleone for Father of the Year. Drop a trophy in the comments if you agree. And listen, if you're loving this transformation, make sure you're subscribed because we're only halfway through the story, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Now back to our trio, because someone's about to throw a wrench in their happy little arrangement, asterisk asterisk. After Luke went to play in the living room, Sarah lingered in the hallway, her professional mask slipping back into place. We need to talk, she said quietly. Julian's stomach dropped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. But the 60-day emergency placement ends in 5 weeks. We need to start the formal foster certification process if you want to keep him long-term. I thought that's what we were doing. We are. But there's a complication. She glanced toward the living room, lowered her voice further. Luke's previous foster mother, Mrs. Chun, has filed a complaint. She's claiming you coerced Luke into leaving her care, that you're using your wealth and influence to circumvent proper channels. Julian's blood turned to ice. That's insane. He ran away because she was going to abandon him. I know that. You know that. But she has documentation showing she was in compliance with all foster care requirements. And her lawyer is very good. Sarah's expression turned grim. They're pushing for a formal custody hearing. If they succeed, Luke goes back into the system while the courts sort it out.
No.
The word came out with enough force to make Sarah flinch. That's not happening. Julian, I'm on your side. But we need to be smart about this. Mrs. Chun has something we don't. A spotless record as a foster parent. You're a billionaire with no childcare experience who took in a child under unusual circumstances. A judge might see you as the problem, not the solution. Then we make them see otherwise. Julian's mind shifted into boardroom mode, strategic, calculating, ready for war. What do we need? Evidence that you're providing a stable, loving home. That Luke is thriving. That this isn't some whim or guilt-driven impulse. She hesitated. And we need to address the elephant in the room. Which is? You're single, Julian.
Male.
Wealthy. The system is biased against single men adopting, especially when there's a significant age gap. Some people will question your motives. The implication hit him like a slap. You think someone might accuse me of, he couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't even form the words for something so vile. I think Mrs. Chen's lawyer will use every weapon available, including innuendo. Sarah's face showed her disgust. I've seen it before. It's ugly and wrong, but it works. Wealthy single man taking in vulnerable child? They'll plant seeds of doubt. Julian felt sick. What do? We build an unassailable case. Character witnesses. Documentation of Luke's progress. Expert testimony from his therapist. And she paused, clearly uncomfortable. It would help if you had a partner. Someone to provide a two-parent household image. I don't have a partner. I know. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Was it disappointment? I'm just telling you what a judge wants to see. They stood in the hallway, the weight of the system's prejudices pressing down on them. Julian thought about losing Luke, about watching him disappear back into a system that had failed him repeatedly. There has to be another way, he said. There is. We fight. We document everything. We show that Luke is better off with you than anywhere else. Sarah's hand landed on his arm, warm and steady. You're not alone in this, Julian. I'm going to fight for you both. The touch lasted a moment too long. Their eyes met, and Julian saw something there he hadn't noticed before, or maybe hadn't let himself notice. Attraction. Connection. Something deeper than professional collaboration. Sarah pulled her hand back quickly, suddenly professional again. I should go. I have another visit across town. Wait. Julian didn't know what he was going to say until the words were already out. Have dinner with us. Luke would like it. And he stopped, regrouped. It would be good for him to see positive adult interactions. The excuse was flimsy, and they both knew it. Sarah's smile turned genuine. Is that the only reason you're asking? No, Julian admitted. It's not. Then I'd love to stay. Dinner was chaotic in ways Julian's carefully controlled life had never been. Luke insisted on helping cook, which resulted in flour everywhere and slightly burnt pasta. Sarah laughed through the whole disaster, rolling up her sleeves and jumping in without hesitation. Julian stood at the stove, watching these two people fill his apartment with noise and warmth and life, and realized with startling clarity that he didn't want this to end. Not in 5 weeks. Not ever. Julian, the sauce is burning, Sarah called, pulling him from his thoughts. He grabbed the pan, salvaging what he could while Luke narrated the entire process like a cooking show host. They ate at the table, a real meal, together, like a real family, and Julian felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. Hope. After dinner, Luke crashed on the couch with Mr. Bear, finally giving in to exhaustion. Sarah helped Julian clean up, their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, comfortable. He's happy here, Sarah said softly, watching Luke sleep. Really happy. I haven't seen him this relaxed in years. He has nightmares every night. But he has you to comfort him. That's more than he's ever had before. She turned to Julian, her expression serious. You're good at this. Better than you think. I'm terrified every moment that I'm going to screw this up.
Good.
That means you care. Sarah moved closer, and Julian caught the scent of her perfume, something subtle and floral. Can I tell you something? Yes. When I first met you, I thought you were exactly what everyone says you are.
Cold.
Ruthless. Caring only about profit. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. I was wrong. You're one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. You just hide it really well. Julian looked down at their joined hands. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. Being a father. Being... He trailed off, afraid to finish. Being what? Being someone who deserves good things. Sarah's other hand came up, cupping his face with a tenderness that made his throat close. You deserve everything, Julian. You just have to let yourself believe it. They were standing too close. Julian knew he should step back, maintain boundaries. Remember that Sarah was Luke's caseworker and any relationship beyond professional would complicate everything. But then Sarah rose on her toes and kissed him, soft, sweet, asking rather than demanding, and Julian forgot every reason why this was a bad idea. He kissed her back, gentle and uncertain, like someone remembering a language they'd forgotten they spoke. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah was smiling. That was... Julian struggled for words. Unprofessional. I was going to say perfect. Her smile widened. We should probably talk about boundaries and professional ethics. Probably. Later. Much later. They kissed again, and Julian felt something inside him crack open, the last wall he'd built to keep people out, crumbling under the weight of everything he'd been denying himself for 30 years. Luke stirred on the couch, mumbling in his sleep. They broke apart quickly, both smiling like teenagers caught sneaking out. I should go, Sarah whispered, before we make this more complicated. Too late. It's already complicated. Good complicated or bad complicated? Julian thought about Luke sleeping peacefully on his couch, about Sarah's hand in his, about the future he could almost see, messy and scary and absolutely worth fighting for. Good, he said. Definitely good. After Sarah left, Julian carried Luke to bed, tucked him in with Mr. Bear, and sat watching him sleep. The boy who'd hidden in his car 3 weeks ago looked different now, less haunted, more solid, like he was finally starting to believe he could stay. Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Tonight was wonderful. Thank you for letting me in. He typed back, thank you for seeing past what I pretend to be. I see exactly who you are, Julian Corleone, and I like him very much. Julian smiled in the darkness, feeling lighter than he had in decades. He didn't know that across town, Mrs. Chun was meeting with her lawyer, building a case that would threaten everything. He didn't know that the system he was fighting had teeth sharper than he'd imagined. He didn't know that the happiness spreading through his chest like warmth would soon be tested in ways that would break him completely. But for tonight, watching Luke sleep peacefully while Sarah's text glowed on his screen, Julian let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have this. All of this. Forever. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed Julian the papers. Custody hearing. Emergency motion to remove minor from current placement. Julian's hands shook as he read. Mrs. Chun wasn't just challenging the arrangement. She was demanding Luke's immediate removal, citing concerning circumstances and potential endangerment. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. 3 days away. Julian. Luke appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school in the uniform Julian had bought him, navy polo, khaki pants, sneakers that actually fit. What's wrong? Everything. Everything was wrong. But Julian forced his face into something resembling calm. Nothing, buddy. Just work stuff. Luke's eyes, too sharp, too knowing, studied him. You're lying. You get this look when you're worried. Your jaw does this thing. He demonstrated, clenching his teeth. Despite the panic clawing at his chest, Julian almost smiled. When did you get so observant? I've always been observant. That's how you survive. Luke moved closer, and Julian saw the fear creeping into his expression. Someone wants to take me away, don't they? There was no point lying. Luke had lived through enough broken promises and half-truths. Your former foster mother filed a legal challenge. There's going to be a hearing on Friday. Julian set the papers down, crouched to Luke's eye level. But we're going to fight this. Sarah, me, our lawyer. What if we lose? Luke's voice cracked. What if they make me go back? That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. Luke's hands fisted at his sides, Mr. Bear dangling from one grip. Nobody can promise that. The system always wins. It always. His breath hitched, panic attack building. Julian pulled him close, felt the small body trembling. Listen to me. I am not letting anyone take you. I don't care what I have to do, how much I have to spend, who I have to fight. You are mine now, and I protect what's mine. Understood? Luke nodded against his chest, but Julian could feel the doubt radiating from him. The boy had been abandoned too many times to believe in permanence. Sarah arrived within the hour, her face grim as she studied the subpoena. This is aggressive, she said, pacing Julian's living room while Luke sat on the couch pretending to read. Mrs. Chen's lawyer is going nuclear. They're alleging you manipulated Luke, that you're using your wealth to circumvent proper channels, and, she paused, glanced at Luke, lowered her voice. They're questioning your motives for taking in a male child. Julian's blood turned to ice. They're implying.
Yes.
It's disgusting and baseless, but it's effective. Puts you on the defensive immediately. Sarah's jaw tightened. I should have seen this coming. Mrs. Chun lost her fostering stipend when Luke left. She's been taking in kids for 15 years. That's her primary income. You cost her money. So, this is about a paycheck?
Partly.
But it's also about pride. You embarrassed her. Made her look like a failure. And now her lawyer, Tom Davidson, real piece of work, has convinced her she can win damages too. Emotional distress, loss of income, defamation. Julian moved to the window, rage and fear warring inside him. Below, the city hummed with its usual chaos, oblivious to the fact that his entire world was crumbling. What do we need to do? Present an airtight case that you're the better option. I'll testify about Luke's progress. We'll bring in Dr. Miller, his therapist. Character witnesses. Financial stability documentation. Sarah joined him at the window, her reflection serious beside his. But Julian, there's something else. The way she said it made his stomach drop. What? I did some digging into the Riverside demolition. The official records. She pulled out her tablet, brought up a document. Look at the resident manifest. 48 units, all accounted for. But I cross-referenced with the school district records. Julian stared at the screen, not understanding. So Luke was enrolled at PS 142. His address on file? Riverside Apartments, Unit 31. But look at the relocation manifest. She scrolled. Unit 31 is listed as vacant. Has been for 6 months. The implications hit him like a freight train. That's impossible. Luke was living there.
Exactly.
Which means either your relocation team made a catastrophic error, or Sarah's expression darkened, or someone falsified the records. Made it look like the unit was empty when it wasn't. Why would anyone do that?
Money.
If units are listed as vacant, there's no relocation costs. No compensation packages. The savings on a building like Riverside. She pulled up another document. Roughly $400,000. Julian's mind raced. Who would have access to those records? Your relocation coordinator. Richard, your CFO. Anyone in the legal department. Sarah met his eyes. Julian, if this comes out during the hearing, if Davidson finds out that Luke was nearly killed because someone at your company committed fraud, you'll lose him. The judge will see you as responsible. I didn't know. It doesn't matter. It happened on your watch. In your building. During your demolition. Her voice gentled. I believe you. But a judge might not. Julian turned to find Luke watching them, his face pale. Luke. I heard. The boy stood, clutching Mr. Bear. Someone lied about our apartment. Someone wanted to save money, so they said nobody lived there. And that's why the wrecking ball came. We don't know that for sure. Yes, we do. Luke's voice was steady, but tears gathered in his eyes. It makes sense. The construction guy who found me, he kept saying they'd checked 3 times. That we weren't supposed to be there. I thought I'd just hidden really good, but... He swallowed hard. Someone made us disappear on paper. Like we didn't matter. The raw pain in those words shattered something in Julian's chest. He crossed to Luke, knelt down. You matter. You have always mattered. And I'm going to find out who did this. I promise you. And then what? Luke's tears spilled over. We tell the judge that your company almost killed me? That's supposed to make them want me to stay with you. He had a point. A devastating, horrible point. Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned. It's Davidson. Mrs. Chen's lawyer. She answered, putting it on speaker. Sarah Connor. Dr. Connor. Tom Davidson here. The voice was smooth, practiced. I understand you're planning to testify on Mr. Corleone's behalf at Friday's hearing. That's correct. I'd advise against it. Professionally speaking. A pause, loaded with threat. Your involvement in this case has been irregular. Emergency placement without proper vetting. Personal relationship with a guardian. I'd hate to see your career suffer because of poor judgment. Sarah's face hardened. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. But since we're talking, let me be clear. My client has documentation of Mr. Corleone's unsuitability. Financial coercion. Inappropriate living arrangements. A pattern of reckless behavior that endangered a child. Another pause. We also have information about certain discrepancies in the Riverside demolition. Information that might interest the district attorney. Julian and Sarah's eyes met. He knew. Somehow, Davidson already knew about the fraud. We'll see you in court, Mr. Davidson, Sarah said coldly and hung up. The silence that followed was suffocating. He has the records, Julian said. He's going to use the Riverside fraud against us. Which means someone gave it to him. Someone from your company. Sarah's mind was clearly racing. Who benefits from you losing this case? Julian thought about his board, about Richard, who'd been furious about the demolition delays, about Amanda Hayes, his legal counsel, who'd argued against the new safety protocols, about dozens of executives who saw his sudden fatherhood as a liability, a distraction from profit. It could be anyone, he admitted. Half my board thinks I've gone soft. They want the old Julian back, the one who didn't stop construction schedules for safety checks. Luke's voice cut through the tension. Maybe that Julian was wrong. They both turned to him. The old you, Luke continued, wiping his tears. The one who didn't care about people. Maybe he was wrong, and they don't want to admit it, because then they'd have to change too. His chin lifted in that defiant way Julian had come to love. But you did change. You're better now. And if they can't see that, that's their problem. Julian felt his throat close. This 7-year-old child, traumatized, abandoned, nearly killed, was comforting him, trying to make him feel better about his own failures. Come here, Julian said roughly, and Luke crashed into him, arms wrapping tight around his neck. I don't want to lose you, Luke whispered. You're the only dad I've ever had. The word hit Julian like lightning. Dad. Not Julian. Not Mr. Corleone.
Dad.
You're not losing me, Julian promised into Luke's hair. Whatever it takes. We're staying together. Sarah's expression showed equal parts heartbreak and determination. Then we need to go on offense. If someone at your company committed fraud and Davidson knows about it, we use that. We show the judge that you've been trying to make things right, that you shut down demolitions to prevent this from happening again. How does that help? Julian asked. Because it shows character growth. Accountability. The exact opposite of what Mrs. Chun is claiming. Sarah grabbed her bag, already moving toward the door. I need to file some motions. And you need to figure out who leaked those records. If we can prove corporate sabotage, we can flip this narrative. After she left, Julian and Luke sat together on the couch, neither speaking. The penthouse felt too big, too empty, too temporary, like it might all vanish at any moment. Julian. Luke's voice was small. If I have to go back, if the judge says I can't stay, will you visit me? The question broke him. Luke. I just need to know. If I lose you, will you at least remember me? Or will I just be another mistake you made? Julian pulled the boy onto his lap, held him like he was the most precious thing in the world because he was. You listen to me. You are not a mistake. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You changed my entire life. And if, his voice cracked, if something goes wrong on Friday, I will fight until there's nothing left to fight with. I will appeal. I will sue. I will burn down the entire system if I have to. You are my son now. And I don't give up on my son. Luke cried then, real, gasping sobs that shook his whole body. And Julian held him, rocked him, and made promises he prayed he could keep. Outside, the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Somewhere in the city, Tom Davidson was preparing his case. Somewhere in Julian's company, a traitor was feeding him ammunition. And in 3 days, a judge would decide if love was enough to overcome law, if redemption was possible, if a broken man and a traumatized boy could become a family. Julian held Luke tighter and prepared for war. The nightmare came at 3 a.m. Julian woke to Luke's screams, raw, primal, the sound of a child reliving his worst moment. He ran to Luke's room to find him tangled in sheets, thrashing against invisible walls, trapped in the memory of concrete and dust and collapsing buildings. Luke, wake up. Can't breathe, Mom, the walls. Julian pulled him close, but Luke fought him, eyes open but unseeing, locked in terror. You're safe. You're with me. Don't let them bury me. Luke's scream echoed through the penthouse. It took 20 minutes to bring him back. 20 minutes of holding him while he sobbed and shook, while Julian whispered promises that felt increasingly hollow. When Luke finally calmed, he was limp with exhaustion, his face blotchy and swollen. It's getting worse, Luke whispered. The dreams. Ever since the papers came. Julian's chest constricted. The custody hearing was destroying what little peace Luke had found. Dr. Miller said the anxiety might spike before it gets better. What if it never gets better? Luke's eyes found his, devastated and ancient. What if I'm always broken? You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. Luke pulled Mr. Bear close. The teddy's remaining eyes seemed to stare accusingly at Julian. Maybe Mrs. Chun is right. Maybe I am too much trouble. Maybe you'd be better off without me. Don't say that. Don't ever. It's true, though. Luke's voice went flat, emotionless, the tone of a child reciting facts he'd learned too well. I wake you up every night. I cost you money. I'm making your business partners mad. And now I might make you lose everything because of what happened at Riverside. He looked up, tears streaming. Maybe if I go back, everything goes back to normal for you. Julian felt something inside him crack. Luke, listen to me. I don't want to listen. Luke pulled away, pressing himself against the headboard. Everyone always tells me things will be okay, that someone will want me, that I'll find a real home. But they're lying. Nobody wants broken kids. We're just problems to solve, and when we're too hard to solve, they give up. I'm not giving up on you. You say that now. But what about after Friday? What if the judge says no? What if they make me leave? Luke's voice rose, panic bleeding through. What if you realize I'm not worth fighting for? The words hit Julian like bullets. He moved slowly, carefully, and sat on the edge of the bed. Do you know what I thought about all day yesterday? While I was digging through company records trying to find who betrayed us. Luke shook his head. I thought about your first morning here. You were so scared, but you tried to be brave. You asked me about my family, and I told you I didn't have one. Julian's throat tightened. But I was wrong. I do have a family. I have you. And that's worth more than every building I've ever built, every dollar I've ever made, every success I've ever achieved. You have to say that. I don't have to say anything. But I'm choosing to tell you the truth. Julian reached out, waited until Luke took his hand. You changed me, Luke. You made me remember what it means to care about something more than winning. And if I lose everything else, my company, my reputation, my fortune, but I get to keep you, I win. Luke's lower lip trembled. You mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life. They sat in the darkness, hands clasped, two people learning to trust that promises could be kept. I'm scared, Luke finally whispered.
Me too, buddy.
Me too. Thursday morning brought worse news. Julian's lawyer, Marcus Sheffield, a man he'd paid millions over the years, walked into his office, wearing defeat on his face. We have a problem, Marcus said without preamble. Davidson filed a motion yesterday evening. He has a witness. What kind of witness? Someone from your company. Anonymous for now, but their testimony claims you've been erratic, making poor business decisions, showing signs of instability. Marcus set down a folder. They're painting you as someone having a breakdown, using Luke as a band-aid for your own trauma. Julian's blood turned to ice. That's insane. Is it? Marcus's expression was pointed. You shut down 3 active demolitions without board approval. You've missed critical meetings. You've alienated half your executive team. From a legal standpoint, they have a case that you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 20 years. The court won't see it that way. They'll see a billionaire having a midlife crisis with a vulnerable child caught in the middle. Marcus pulled out more documents. And there's something else. Davidson has medical records. Whose medical records?
Luke's.
From his previous foster placements. Marcus's voice gentled slightly. The boy has been hospitalized twice for malnutrition. There are reports of behavioral issues, hoarding food, night terrors, attachment problems. Davidson is arguing that Luke needs specialized therapeutic care that you're not qualified to provide. Julian wanted to put his fist through the wall. He's getting that care. We have Dr. Miller, who's been seeing him for 3 weeks. Davidson has years of documentation showing systemic issues. Marcus leaned forward. Julian, I need you to hear this. We might lose. The evidence against you is circumstantial but compelling. Single male, no parenting experience, questionable circumstances, a child with severe trauma. The odds are not in our favor. Then we change the odds.
How?
Julian's mind raced through options, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. Money wouldn't work. Judges resented billionaires trying to buy outcomes. Threats would backfire catastrophically. Legal maneuvering would take too long. That left only one option: the truth. I'm going to testify, Julian said. I'll tell the judge everything. Why I took Luke in. How he's changed my life. Why we belong together. Marcus looked pained. That's risky. Davidson will tear you apart on cross-examination. He'll bring up your childhood, your mother's addiction, your history of ruthless business practices. Let him. Julian stood, decision crystallizing. I'm not hiding anymore. If the judge is going to decide Luke's future, they need to see who I really am. Not the persona I built. The man I'm becoming. And if that's not enough? Julian had no answer. That afternoon, Sarah came by looking like she hadn't slept. Julian made coffee while Luke did homework at the kitchen island, pretending not to listen. I talked to Dr. Miller, Sarah said quietly. She's willing to testify, but she's concerned about Luke's recent regression. The nightmares are worse. He's showing signs of anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief. He's mourning the loss of you before it happens. Protecting himself from future pain. Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed. Julian, I need to tell you something. Something that might change everything. The seriousness in her tone made his stomach drop. What? She glanced at Luke, then back. Not here. Can we talk privately? They moved to Julian's office. Sarah closed the door, took a breath, and dropped a bomb. I did something I shouldn't have. Something that could cost me my license. She pulled out her phone, showed him an email. I accessed Luke's sealed case files. The ones from before his mother died. Sarah, that's illegal. Yes. But I found something. She pulled up a document, hands shaking. Luke's birth certificate. It lists his father as unknown, but there's a social worker's note attached. An investigation from 7 years ago. Julian stared at the screen, not understanding. The note was brief, clinical. Asterisk mother refused to identify father. Subject claims father was military, deceased. Investigation closed due to lack of evidence. Asterisk. I don't understand what this. Look at the investigating social worker's name.
He did.
And his blood turned to ice. Investigator, Thomas Davidson, NYC Child Services. Davidson investigated Luke's parentage 7 years ago? Julian's mind raced. Why would a child services investigator do that? Because someone requested it. Someone who wanted to find Luke's father. Sarah's expression was grim. Julian, I think Mrs. Chen's lawyer knows who Luke's father is. And I think that's why he's pushing so hard for custody. That doesn't make sense. If someone wanted Luke, why wait 7 years? Maybe they didn't know he existed. Or maybe they knew but didn't care until... She stopped, realization dawning. Until he became connected to you. Until he became valuable. The implications crashed over Julian like a wave. Someone wanted Luke. Not for Luke's sake, but for leverage. For money. For revenge. We need to find out who Luke's father is, Julian said. I'm already trying. But the records are sealed tight, and if I dig any deeper, I'm risking everything. Sarah's voice cracked.
Julian, I'm scared.
If this goes wrong, I lose my license. I lose my career. And Luke loses both of us. Julian pulled her close, felt her trembling against him. Then we don't let it go wrong.
How?
How do we fight something we can't even see? He didn't have an answer. Just held her while the clock ticked down to tomorrow's hearing, while Luke sat in the other room grieving a loss that hadn't happened yet, while enemies circled with weapons Julian couldn't defend against. His phone buzzed. Chun, his driver. Sir, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Won't give a name. Julian and Sarah exchanged looks. Send them up, he texted back. 2 minutes later, his doorbell rang. Luke looked up from his homework, fear flashing across his face. Strangers at the door now meant threat. Stay here, Julian told him, then open the door. The woman standing there was in her 60s, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and an expression that radiated authority. She looked vaguely familiar, but Julian couldn't place her. "Mr. Corleone, we need to talk about Luke." She glanced past him, saw the boy at the island, and her face transformed, grief and longing and something fierce. "We need to talk about my grandson." The world tilted. Luke's grandmother. Here.
Now.
24 hours before the hearing. Behind him, Julian heard Luke's sharp intake of breath, heard Sarah's whispered curse, felt his entire world fracturing along fault lines he hadn't known existed. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she stared at Luke. "Hello, sweetheart. My name is Margaret. I'm your mother's mother, and I've been looking for you for a very long time." Luke stood frozen, Mr. Bear dangling from his hand, looking between this stranger and Julian with pure terror. "Julian." His voice was small, broken. "Who is she?" And Julian, who'd promised to protect this boy, who'd sworn nothing would separate them, had absolutely no idea what to say. The dark moment had arrived, and it was darker than any of them had imagined. Margaret Walsh stood in Julian's penthouse like a ghost materializing from Luke's past. She wore a cream blazer and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled, but her hands trembled as she clutched a worn leather purse. "You need to leave," Julian said, positioning himself between her and Luke.
Now. Please.
"Just 5 minutes." Her voice cracked. "I've been searching for him since Emily died. 2 years of dead ends and closed doors. When I heard about the custody hearing, I knew I had to come forward." Sarah stepped forward, her social worker instincts taking over. "Mrs. Walsh, if you're claiming familial rights, there are proper channels." "I know the channels. My husband, your grandfather, never knew you existed. Emily made me swear to keep the secret, and I did because I was a coward." Tears streamed down Margaret's face. "But then she died and I tried to find you. The system had you buried in paperwork. Every time I got close, you'd been moved to a new placement. And then you vanished completely 6 weeks ago." Julian's mind raced. "How did you know to come here?" "Tom Davidson." Margaret's expression hardened. "He contacted me 3 days ago. Said he was representing your former foster mother in a custody case. Said Luke was living with a billionaire who'd taken him in under questionable circumstances. He offered to help me file for custody. For a fee," Sarah said bitterly. "For 30% of whatever settlement I could get from you." Margaret looked at Julian with something like apology. "He assumed I wanted money. That I'd sue you for damages, claim you'd stolen my grandson. He laid out a whole strategy, paint you as predatory, unstable, dangerous. Use my grief as a weapon. And you came here to warn us?" Julian didn't believe in altruism from strangers. "I came here to see if any of it was true." Margaret took a step closer, her voice strengthening. "Davidson painted you as a monster. But then I did my own research. Found articles about you shutting down demolitions, implementing new safety protocols, taking heat from your board because you suddenly care more about people than profits." She looked at Luke. "And I found out why. Because of him. Because you nearly killed my grandson and couldn't live with yourself." Luke hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He stood frozen at the kitchen island, clutching Mr. Bear, his face an unreadable mask.
"Luke."
Julian turned to him. "Do you want to talk to her?" "I don't know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Is she lying?" Margaret flinched.
"No, sweetheart."
"I'm not lying. I have proof, photos of your mother, birth records, letters she wrote to me." She pulled an envelope from her purse with shaking hands. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I loved your mother more than anything, and I've been looking for you because you're all I have left of her." Sarah moved beside Luke, protective. "Mrs. Walsh, Luke has been through significant trauma. Whatever your intentions, showing up unannounced the night before a custody hearing is." I know it's terrible timing." Margaret's composure was cracking. "But Davidson is going to ambush you tomorrow. He's planning to call me as a surprise witness. Paint me as the grieving grandmother being kept from her only family by a selfish billionaire. He'll say I've been trying to reach Luke for months, and you've been blocking me." Julian's blood turned cold. Have you been trying to reach him?
No.
I only found out where he was 3 days ago. But Davidson will lie. He'll create a narrative of parental alienation, of you manipulating a vulnerable child. She looked directly at Julian. He'll destroy you. And then he'll take Luke from both of us and hand him back to Mrs. Chen, who'll get paid handsomely for her trouble. This is insane, Sarah breathed. He's orchestrating this entire thing for money? Davidson specializes in foster care fraud. I did my research after he contacted me. He's been under investigation twice. Nothing ever stuck, but the pattern is clear. He finds vulnerable children in the system, manufactures custody disputes, and profits from the chaos. Margaret's hands fisted. When he approached me, I played along. Let him think I wanted revenge against you. But really, I was gathering evidence. She pulled out her phone, showed them a recording app. I have him on tape offering to falsify documents, coaching me on what to say in court, explaining how we'd split the settlement. Her smile was grim. He didn't know I was recording everything. Julian stared at this woman who'd appeared from nowhere with evidence that could change everything. Why are you giving this to us? Because I spent 2 years being angry at the system for losing my grandson. And then I found out you'd given him something I never could, a home. A chance. Margaret's voice broke again. I look at these photos you've posted online. This penthouse full of his drawings. The school enrollment records. The medical care. The therapy. You're doing everything I should have done. Everything I was too afraid to do. She turned to Luke, and her face transformed with such raw love that Julian felt his chest constrict. I don't want to take you away from him, sweetheart. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. But I want you to be happy more than I want anything else. And if that means staying with Mr. Corleone, then I'll fight beside him tomorrow to make sure that happens. Luke finally moved. Slowly, carefully. He walked around the island and stopped a few feet from Margaret. Up close, Julian could see the resemblance. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn chin. You have pictures of my mom? Luke asked. Margaret nodded, pulling out a small photo album from her purse with shaking hands. Hundreds of them. From when she was a baby all the way up to... She didn't finish. Luke took the album like it was made of glass. Opened it to reveal a young woman with Luke's smile, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. That's her holding you, Margaret whispered. 3 days old. She was so scared, but so in love. She told me you were going to be extraordinary, that you were going to change the world. Her voice cracked. She was right. Luke touched the photo with one finger, tracing his mother's face. She never talked about you. I didn't know I had a grandmother. I know. I'm so sorry. I should have fought harder. Should have been braver. Margaret knelt down, putting herself at Luke's eye level. But I'm here now. And if you'll give me a chance, I'd like to try to be the grandmother you deserved all along. Julian watched Luke's face cycle through emotions, confusion, anger, hope, fear. The boy looked at him, silently asking for permission. For guidance. It's your choice, buddy, Julian said gently. Whatever you want. Luke studied Margaret for a long moment. Then, do you like Star Wars? The question surprised a laugh out of her. I love Star Wars. Your mother made me watch them 100 times. Which movie is best? Empire Strikes Back.
No contest.
Luke's shoulders relaxed slightly. That's the right answer. He looked down at the photo album again. Can I keep this? Just for tonight. It's yours. Everything I have of your mother's is yours. Margaret stood, wiping her eyes. And tomorrow, in court, I'm going to tell the judge exactly what I told you. That you belong with Mr. Corleone. That he's given you the home I couldn't. Sarah was already on her phone. I need to call Marcus. If we have Davidson on tape admitting to fraud, we can file an emergency motion. Get him removed from the case. Won't that tip him off? Julian asked. Maybe. But it's better than letting him ambush us with false testimony. Sarah's fingers flew over her screen. Margaret, I need you to send me those recordings immediately. And I need a statement, everything Davidson told you, every meeting, every conversation. Margaret nodded, already forwarding files. I have documents too. Text messages. Emails. Everything you need to prove he's been manufacturing this case. Julian's phone buzzed. Chun, his driver. Sir, there's a man outside claiming to be from Child Services. Demanding entry. Says he has a warrant. Julian's blood froze. It's Davidson. He knows she's here. Sarah's face went pale. He must have been following her. Damn it. She turned to Margaret. Did you tell him you were coming? No, but he's been calling nonstop. When I didn't answer, Margaret looked stricken. I'm sorry. I didn't think. It's fine. We handle this. Julian's mind shifted into crisis mode. Sarah, take Luke to the bedroom.
Keep him calm.
Margaret, you're going to wait here with me. Julian, if Davidson has a warrant, Sarah started. Then he has to serve it properly. Through the door. Legally. Julian's voice hardened into the steel that had built his empire. And while he's doing that, you're going to call Marcus and get an emergency hearing scheduled for first thing tomorrow morning. We're going on offense. The doorbell rang. Then again. Then continuous, aggressive buzzing. Luke's face had gone white. He's going to take me.
Right now.
Isn't he?
No.
Julian's voice was absolute. Nobody is taking you anywhere. Sarah? She nodded, ushering Luke toward the bedroom. As they disappeared down the hall, Julian turned to Margaret. Are you ready to burn down Tom Davidson's career? Her expression hardened into something fierce. I've been ready for years. He's been preying on families like mine for too long. Julian opened the door. Tom Davidson stood in the hallway, mid-50s, expensive suit, smile like a shark. Behind him stood two uniformed officers, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Corleone, I have a court order for the immediate removal of Luke Skywalker from these premises. He held up papers. Emergency motion granted based on evidence of improper placement and potential endangerment. Julian's lawyer instincts kicked in. Show me the judge's signature. Davidson handed over the documents. Julian scanned them quickly. Legitimate seal, proper formatting, signed by Judge Patricia Morrison 2 hours ago. Based on what evidence? Julian demanded. That's confidential until tomorrow's hearing. But I'm authorized to take the child into protective custody immediately. Davidson's smile widened. So, if you'll just...
No.
The single word stopped him cold.
I'm sorry.
I said no. You're not taking him. Julian pulled out his own phone, hit record. And, before you try, I should tell you that we have evidence of your fraud. Recordings of you attempting to coerce Margaret Walsh into falsifying testimony. Documentation of your pattern of manufacturing custody disputes for profit. And a social worker who's about to file a formal complaint with the state bar. Davidson's face drained of color. That's, you can't prove. Actually, we can. Margaret appeared beside Julian, holding up her phone. Every conversation, every coaching session, every promise you made about how we'd split the money. Her voice was ice. I have everything, Tom. And it's already been sent to the district attorney. The officers exchanged glances, suddenly uncertain. Davidson's composure cracked. You recorded me? That's illegal. New York is a one-party consent state, Julian said coldly. Which you'd know if you were actually a good lawyer. Now get out of my home before I add harassment to the list of charges. The court order is based on false evidence, which means it's invalid. And if you try to execute it anyway, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. Julian stepped forward, using every inch of his height advantage. You picked the wrong family to destroy, Davidson. Now leave. Before I make you. For a moment, Davidson looked like he might push back. Then his eyes darted to the officers, who were clearly having second thoughts, and his shoulders sagged. This isn't over, he said, but the threat was hollow. Yes, Julian said quietly. It is. You're done. Davidson turned and walked away, the officers following. Julian closed the door and leaned against it, adrenaline crashing through his system. Margaret touched his arm. That was incredibly risky. So, is everything worth doing? Sarah emerged from the hallway, Luke peeking out behind her. Is he gone? He's gone. Julian opened his arms, and Luke ran to him, burying his face in Julian's shirt. I thought he was going to take me, Luke whispered.
Never.
I will never let anyone take you. Julian looked over Luke's head at Sarah and Margaret, this unlikely alliance of people who'd come together to protect one 7-year-old boy. We're going to win tomorrow. All of us. Together. Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her face transformed into a brilliant smile. Marcus just filed the emergency motion. Judge Morrison agreed to hear it first thing tomorrow morning, before the custody hearing. If we can prove Davidson's fraud, the whole case gets thrown out. What about Mrs. Chen? Luke asked, his voice muffled against Julian's chest. Without Davidson manipulating her, she's got no case, Sarah explained. The emergency placement stands, and we continue with the formal foster certification process. Luke pulled back, looked up at Julian with hope dawning in his eyes. So, I can stay? You can stay. Forever. Julian knelt down, holding Luke's face gently between his hands. Forever. I'm going to make this official. Adoption papers, legal documents, everything. You're going to be Luke Skywalker Corleone. If that's what you want. Luke's answer was to throw his arms around Julian's neck and hold on like he'd never let go. Over his shoulder, Julian saw Sarah wiping tears and Margaret clutching the photo album with a bittersweet smile. They'd won. Not completely, not yet. Tomorrow would still be a battle. But they'd survived the darkness. And on the other side, something new was forming. A family. Broken pieces coming together into something stronger than any of them had been alone. Thank you, Julian said to Margaret. For coming forward. For choosing Luke over revenge. Thank you for loving my grandson when I was too afraid to. She moved closer, hesitantly touched Luke's hair. Emily would be so happy to know he is you. Luke turned in Julian's arms, looked at his grandmother. Will you come to court tomorrow? I want you there. When we win. Margaret's face crumpled. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. As they sat together in the living room, planning strategy, sharing stories, building bridges, Julian felt something he'd never experienced before. Peace. Not the temporary absence of conflict, but the deep certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, with exactly the people who mattered. The revelation had come, not from secrets uncovered, but from truth freely given. And tomorrow, they would make it official. Tomorrow, they would become family. The courtroom was smaller than Julian expected. No grand mahogany panels or soaring ceilings. Just fluorescent lights and worn linoleum that had seen decades of families torn apart and rebuilt. Judge Patricia Morrison presided from her bench, a black woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had witnessed every lie humans could tell. Julian sat at the defendant's table with Marcus on his left and Sarah on his right. Behind them, Margaret Walsh sat in the front row, her presence both comfort and complication. Luke was in a conference room down the hall with a child advocate, spared from witnessing this until absolutely necessary. Across the aisle, Tom Davidson sat alone. Mrs. Chun hadn't shown up. According to the bailiff's whisper report, she'd withdrawn her complaint an hour ago after learning about Davidson's fraud investigation. But Davidson wasn't done fighting. Your Honor, he began, standing with practiced confidence, I understand there have been allegations made against me. Character attacks designed to distract from the real issue, a vulnerable child placed in an unsuitable home through irregular channels. Judge Morrison's expression was granite. Mr. Davidson, I've reviewed the emergency motion filed last night. I've listened to the recordings provided by Mrs. Walsh. Would you like to explain why you coached a witness to provide false testimony? Those recordings are taken out of context. I don't need context to hear you discussing settlement splits and document falsification. She leaned forward. I'm referring this matter to the State Bar. You're suspended from this case effective immediately. Davidson's face flushed red. Your Honor, you can't. I can and I have. Sit down, Mr. Davidson, or I'll hold you in contempt. He sat, vibrating with rage. Without him, Mrs. Chen's case evaporated like morning fog. But Julian felt no relief. This wasn't over yet. Now, Judge Morrison continued, turning her attention to Julian. Mr. Corleone, you've created quite the situation. taking in a foster child through emergency placement, making significant life changes, and now seeking formal custody. Walk me through your reasoning. Julian stood, Marcus beside him. Your Honor, I don't have a speech prepared. I only have the truth. That's a good place to start. He took a breath. 6 weeks ago, I found Luke hiding in my car. He told me I'd destroyed his home, and he was right. My company demolished the building he lived in. Due to fraud within my organization, his apartment was listed as vacant when it wasn't. He was nearly killed because I didn't ask enough questions. Because I care more about profit than people. The judge's expression didn't change, but she was listening intently. I could have called authorities immediately, sent him back into the system, and gone on with my life. But something stopped me. Julian's throat tightened. I saw myself in him. A scared kid who'd been abandoned by every system meant to protect him. And I couldn't, his voice cracked. I couldn't let him become what I almost became. Someone who believes they're not worth saving. So you saved him instead, Judge Morrison said. It wasn't quite a question. No, Your Honor. He saved me. He reminded me that success means nothing if you're alone. That money can't buy the things that actually matter. He gave me a reason to be better than I was. Touching. But I'm not interested in your redemption arc, Mr. Corleone. I'm interested in what's best for Luke. She pulled up a file on her computer. I have reports here from his therapist, Dr. Elizabeth Miller. She notes significant progress, but ongoing trauma, night terrors, anxiety, attachment issues. Her eyes found Julian's. This child needs stability, professional care, a family equipped to handle his needs. Can you provide that? I'm trying to, Your Honor. I've enrolled him in the best school in Manhattan. I've arranged therapy 3 times a week. I've reorganized my entire life around his needs. Julian's hands clenched at his sides. Is it perfect?
No.
Do I make mistakes? Every single day. But I love him. And he knows he's safe with me. Love isn't always enough. It's a start. Judge Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then, I'd like to speak with Luke. Privately. In chambers. Julian's heart stopped. Your Honor. This is not negotiable, Mr. Corleone. The child's voice matters here. I need to hear directly from him what he wants. She stood. We'll recess for 15 minutes while I speak with Luke. Everyone else stays here. As she left, Sarah grabbed Julian's hand under the table. This is good. Luke will tell her the truth. What if the truth isn't enough? Julian's voice was barely above a whisper. What if she decides I'm not qualified? Then we appeal. And we keep fighting. Sarah squeezed tighter. But I think Luke is going to surprise you. Marcus leaned in. Julian, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the judge might order a transition period. Even if she rules in your favor, she might require additional oversight. Home visits. Continued therapy evaluations. Proof that this arrangement is sustainable long-term. I'll do whatever it takes. I know. But whatever it takes might include accepting Margaret Walsh's involvement. If she petitions for grandparent visitation rights. She's not petitioning for anything. Margaret's voice came from behind them. She'd moved to the barrier separating the gallery from the tables. I told you last night. I'm here to support Julian and Luke. Not complicate things. Julian turned to face her.
Why?
You have legal standing. You could fight for custody. And traumatize my grandson further?
No.
Margaret's expression was firm. I lost my daughter because I chose my husband's pride over her happiness. I'm not making that mistake again. Luke belongs with you, but I'd like to be part of his life. Birthday visits, holidays, letters. Her voice softened. Just let me know him. That's all I'm asking. Before Julian could respond, the chamber door opened. Luke emerged, followed by Judge Morrison. The boy's eyes were red, he'd been crying, but his face showed something that made Julian's chest constrict. Determination. Resume your seats, Judge Morrison ordered. Once everyone was settled, she remained standing, looking down at all of them with an expression Julian couldn't read. I've had an interesting conversation with Luke. He's a remarkably articulate child. very clear about what he wants. Julian's pulse thundered in his ears.
He told me about his nightmares.
About feeling safe for the first time since his mother died. About a man who reads to him every night and holds him when he's scared. The judge's voice gentled slightly. He also told me he's tired of being moved around like a piece of furniture. That he's ready to have a real home. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Mr. Corleone, I'm granting your petition for emergency foster placement continuation. Luke will remain in your custody while we complete the formal adoption process. Julian's knees nearly buckled. However, the judge continued, her voice sharpening. This comes with conditions. You will undergo parenting classes. You will submit to monthly home evaluations by Dr. Connor. You will continue Luke's therapy without interruption. And you will work with Mrs. Walsh to establish a visitation schedule that serves Luke's best interests. Yes, Your Honor. All of it. Whatever you need. I also want to be clear about something. Judge Morrison's gaze was laser-focused. I'm not doing this because of your wealth or your resources. I'm doing this because Luke asked me to. Because he stood in my chambers and told me that you're the first person who's ever made him feel like he matters. That you cry when he has nightmares because you understand what it means to be scared and alone. Her voice caught slightly. He said you're teaching him that broken things can be fixed. That people who've been hurt can learn to be happy again. Julian couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Don't make me regret this decision, Mr. Corleone. Because if you fail this child, if you prove to be just another person who lets him down, I will personally ensure you never get near another foster child again. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Your Honor. Thank you. I won't, his voice broke. I won't let him down. See that you don't. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Congratulations, Mr. Corleone. You have a son. The words hit Julian like lightning. You have a son. Sarah was crying, laughing, hugging him. Marcus was shaking his hand, saying something about paperwork. Margaret was wiping her eyes and smiling. But all Julian could see was the chamber door opening and Luke walking out, uncertainty written across his face. Their eyes met across the courtroom. We won, Julian said, his voice breaking. You're staying. Forever. Luke's face crumpled. He ran, not walked, ran, across the courtroom and launched himself at Julian, who caught him and held on like he'd never let go. You're my dad now? Luke sobbed into his shoulder. Really? For real? For real, buddy. I'm your dad. And you're my son. Nothing is ever going to change that. Luke clung tighter. I was so scared. In the judge's room, she kept asking me questions, and I was afraid I'd say something wrong. You said everything right. You told the truth. That's all that mattered. Julian pulled back just enough to see Luke's face, wiping tears with his thumbs. I'm so proud of you. Do you know that? I'm so incredibly proud of who you are. Even though I'm broken? You're not broken. You're brave. And strong. And perfect exactly as you are. Julian pressed his forehead to Luke's. We're going to have bad days. Days when the nightmares come and everything feels hard. But we're going to face them together. As a family. A real family? The realest. Sarah joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. Margaret hung back, giving them space, but her smile was radiant. There's one more thing, Julian said, looking at Luke seriously. Your grandmother wants to be part of your life. If that's okay with you. No pressure. Just. I want that. Luke turned in Julian's arms to face Margaret. I want to know about my mom. And I want you to teach me about her.
But.
He hesitated. Julian is my dad now. That doesn't change, right? Margaret moved forward, kneeling beside them. That will never change, sweetheart. Julian is your father. I'm just the grandmother who's very sorry she took so long to find you. And very grateful you're giving me a second chance. Luke studied her, then nodded. Okay, but you have to come to my school play next month. Dad said I could try out for it. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Davidson slunk past them toward the exit, defeated and furious. Julian felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only gratitude that the man's cruelty had been stopped before it could destroy another family. As they left the courthouse, the autumn sun breaking through clouds, Julian felt Luke's hand slip into his. "Dad." The word sent warmth flooding through Julian's chest. "Yeah, buddy? Can we go home now?"
I'm tired.
"We can go home." Home, not his penthouse. Not a temporary arrangement. Home. The place they'd built together out of fear and hope and learning to trust again. Sarah walked beside them, her hand finding Julian's free one. Margaret followed at a respectful distance, talking quietly on her phone, probably to her husband, probably preparing to navigate those complicated waters. They'd have to work through so much still. Adoption paperwork. Visitation schedules. Julian's company restructuring. Luke's continued healing. Building a relationship with Sarah that honored her professional role while acknowledging what was growing between them. But as they walked through Manhattan's crowded streets, Luke chattering about what he wanted for dinner, Sarah laughing at his suggestions, Margaret promising to bring more photo albums next visit, Julian realized something profound. He'd spent 30 years believing that weakness was vulnerability, that love was a liability, that caring about people made you a target. But he'd been wrong. Love wasn't weakness. It was the only thing strong enough to save you. And the boy holding his hand, the one who'd hidden in his car 6 weeks ago with a dying teddy bear and desperate courage, had taught him that. Luke looked up at him and smiled.
I'm glad you found me, Dad.
Or I found you. Whichever. Julian smiled back, his heart so full it hurt. Me too, Luke. Me too. The final battle had been won. Not through money or power or ruthless strategy, but through truth. Through vulnerability. Through a 7-year-old's courage and a broken man's willingness to heal. And ahead of them lay not an ending, but a beginning. The best one either of them had ever had. 6 months later, Julian stood in the kitchen of his penthouse, no longer a sterile monument to isolation, but a home filled with noise and color and life, attempting to make pancakes. "You're burning them again," Luke observed from his perch on the counter, swinging his legs and grinning. "I'm not burning them. I'm caramelizing them." "That's just a fancy word for burning." Sarah laughed from the doorway, her hair still messy from sleep, wearing one of Julian's shirts. "He's right, you know. You're a billionaire who can't cook pancakes." "I can cook plenty of things," Julian protested, flipping a pancake that was definitely too dark. "I made that pasta last week." "That we ordered from Giovanni's and you plated to look homemade?" Luke's grin widened.
Yeah, Dad.
"We knew." The word still sent warmth through Julian's chest every time he heard it. "Dad." 6 months of hearing it, and it never got old.
Fine.
"You too want perfect pancakes? Make them yourselves." Julian stepped back from the stove with mock indignation. Luke hopped down, suddenly serious. "Actually, Grandma Margaret taught me her recipe last visit. Can I try?" Julian's throat tightened the way it always did when Luke mentioned Margaret so casually, so comfortably. The integration of Luke's grandmother into their lives had been smoother than anyone expected. Weekly video calls, monthly visits, and a growing relationship that healed old wounds for everyone involved. "Go for it, buddy. Show me how it's done." As Luke took over the stove with surprising confidence, Sarah moved beside Julian, sliding her arm around his waist. They'd been dancing around their relationship for months, professional boundaries blurring into something neither of them could deny anymore. Last week, she'd finally moved in some of her things. A toothbrush, some clothes, books that found their way onto his shelves. Small declarations of permanence. "He's happy," she murmured, watching Luke concentrate on his pancakes. "Really, genuinely happy. Dr. Miller said his anxiety scores have dropped significantly. The nightmares are down to once or twice a week." "That's still too many." "That's healing, Julian. It takes time." She squeezed him gently. "You can't fix everything instantly, no matter how much you want to."
He knew she was right.
The past 6 months had been a masterclass in patience, learning that love meant sitting with Luke through panic attacks, not trying to logic them away. Men accepting that some days were harder than others, that progress wasn't linear, that being a father meant showing up even when you didn't have answers. First batch done, Luke announced proudly, sliding 3 perfectly golden pancakes onto a plate. Julian stared. How did you? Medium heat. Patience. Grandma says cooking is like life. If you rush it, you burn it. Luke's smile was pure sunshine. Also, I've been practicing with Chin. He lets me help make breakfast when you're in early meetings. My driver has been teaching you to cook? Chen's been teaching him lots of things, Sarah said, amused. Apparently, he was a chef before he became a driver. Julian made a mental note to give Chen a substantial raise. The man had become unexpectedly important in Luke's life, a steady, gentle presence who taught him practical skills while Julian was still figuring out emotional ones. They ate breakfast together at the table, the same table where Luke had once hidden during a thunderstorm. Now it was covered in Luke's homework, Sarah's case files, Julian's architectural plans for the new community center he was building on the old Riverside lot. The demolition site had been transformed. Instead of luxury condos, Julian was constructing affordable housing with a community center, medical clinic, and educational programs. It wouldn't make him money, would actually cost him millions, but it would help people like Luke. Kids who needed somewhere safe. Families who deserved better than what the system offered. His board had fought him. Half of them had resigned. Richard, his CFO, had taken a position with a competitor. But Julian had stopped caring about what his board thought. He cared about what he saw in the mirror now. And more importantly, what Luke saw.
Dad.
Luke's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Can I ask you something? Always. The adoption papers. When do they become official? Julian and Sarah exchanged glances. They'd been waiting for the right moment to tell him. Actually, Julian said carefully, they already are. The judge signed the final decree yesterday. Luke's fork clattered against his plate. Yesterday?
Why didn't you tell me?
Because I wanted to do it right. With celebration. Not just another day. Julian stood, moved to the hallway closet, and pulled out a wrapped box he'd hidden there. This is for you. Luke took the box with trembling hands. Inside was a leather-bound photo album, the first page showing a picture from yesterday's courthouse visit. Julian in a suit, Luke in the new outfit they'd picked out together, both of them grinning at the camera. Beneath the photo, in elegant script, * Luke Skywalker Corleone. Officially part of our family. November 10th, 2025, *. Luke's eyes filled with tears. I'm really a Corleone now. You really are. Legally, officially, permanently. Julian knelt beside his chair. And I have something else. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring engraved with coordinates. Those are the exact latitude and longitude of this building, Julian explained. Where our family started. Where you hid in my car and changed everything. I had one made for me too. He showed Luke the matching ring on his own finger. So no matter where we are, we carry home with us. Luke threw his arms around Julian's neck, the album falling forgotten to the table.
I love you, Dad.
So much. I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know. Sarah was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. When Luke finally released Julian, he turned to her with sudden seriousness. Sarah, can I ask you something too? Of course, sweetie. Are you going to stay? Like, forever stay? His voice was small, uncertain. Because Dad's been really happy since you've been here more. And I like having you here. But I don't want to get used to it if you're going to leave. Sarah's face crumpled. She knelt down beside Julian, taking Luke's hands. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. Your dad and I. She glanced at Julian, something vulnerable in her expression. We're figuring out what forever looks like. But it definitely includes you. It's always going to include you. Luke nodded slowly, then surprised them both. Good. Because I think you should get married. Then you'd really be stuck with us. Julian choked on his coffee. Sarah's eyes went wide. Luke, Julian started.
What?
I'm 7, not stupid. I see how you look at each other. And yesterday at the courthouse, when the judge asked if there were any other family changes to note, you both got all weird and blushy. Luke's grin returned. Plus, if you marry Sarah, That means I get to be in a wedding. And I've never been in a wedding. Sarah was laughing through tears now. You know what? That's actually solid reasoning. Julian looked at this woman who'd entered his life as an obstacle, become an ally, and transformed into something he couldn't imagine living without. They talked about future, about possibilities, but always in abstract terms. Never with the clarity of a 7-year-old cutting through pretense. Luke does make a good point, Julian said slowly. About me looking at you a certain way. Does he now? Sarah's smile was radiant.
Yeah.
And about being stuck with us. He reached for her hand. For the record, I'd like to be stuck with you. Officially. If you'd be interested in that. Are you proposing to me in your kitchen at 8 in the morning with pancake batter on your shirt? I am spectacularly bad at romance. I literally had to Google how to ask someone to move in last month. That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. So, is that a yes? Sarah pulled him close and kissed him, soft and sure and full of promise. That's a yes, you ridiculous man. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be officially stuck with you both. Yes to all of it. Luke actually hooped, and launched himself at them both. They fell into a tangle of arms and laughter and joy, the pancakes growing cold on the table, the morning sun streaming through windows that no longer felt empty. Oh my goodness, you guys. I'm literally crying as I write this. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button now because I have more stories that will touch your heart just like this one. Drop a red heart in the comments if you believe in second chances and found families. And stay with me for just a few more minutes. I want to show you where they are now. Asterisk, asterisk. 3 years later, the Corleone family gathered in the community center built on the old Riverside site for its grand opening. Luke, now 10 and gangly with the beginnings of adolescence, cut the ribbon alongside Julian, Sarah, and Margaret. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, designed with input from the community it would serve. Medical clinic on the first floor, educational programs on the second, affordable housing units above. A plaque near the entrance read, "In memory of Emily Walsh, who taught her son that broken things can be made beautiful." Margaret stood before it, tears streaming down her face, while her husband, who'd come around slowly but surely, held her hand. They'd become real family now. Sunday dinners. Holidays. Luke's birthday parties where Margaret made her famous chocolate cake and told stories about Emily that kept her memory alive. Chun stood in the back, watching with quiet pride as Luke gave a speech about second chances and communities that care for their people. The man had become an unofficial uncle, teaching Luke to drive, in parking lots, very carefully, sharing recipes, offering the steady male presence that rounded out their family in unexpected ways. Dr. Miller sat in the front row, beaming at her most successful case study. Luke still saw her once a week, probably always would, on some level, but the nightmares were rare now. The fear of abandonment had faded into normal kid anxieties about school and friends, and whether his dad would let him get a dog, still negotiating on that one. Sarah stood beside Julian, her hand resting on her rounded belly. 5 months pregnant with a daughter they'd already named Emily, after the woman whose courage had given them Luke. It had been Sarah's idea, and Margaret had sobbed for an hour when they told her. As Luke finished his speech, talking about how this building represented hope and community, and believing that people could change, Julian felt Sarah lean against him. "You did good," she whispered. "Look at what you built." Julian looked around at the families gathered, at the volunteers ready to staff the center, at the affordable apartments above that would house people who needed a chance. At his son, confident and healthy, and so incredibly brave. At his wife, carrying their daughter. At Margaret, finally at peace with the past. At the community that had embraced them. "We built it," he corrected. "All of us. Together." After the ceremony, as people mingled and explored the new center, Luke found Julian standing alone in front of Emily's plaque. "You okay, Dad?" Julian smiled down at his son, taller now, but still clutching Mr. Bear in situations where he needed comfort. The teddy had been professionally restored last year, its eye reattached, its seams repaired. Like Luke himself, scarred but whole, damaged but healing. "I was just thinking about the day you hid in my car," Julian admitted. How terrified I was. How certain I was that I'd mess everything up. Did you? Mess it up? Probably. In lots of ways. But we figured it out together. Luke studied the plaque, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. Do you think my mom would be happy? About all this? About us? Julian put his arm around Luke's shoulders, pulling him close. I think your mom was one of the wisest people I never met. She raised a son who's brave enough to confront billionaires, kind enough to give second chances, and strong enough to build a family out of broken pieces. So yeah, buddy. I think she'd be really, really happy.
Luke leaned into him.
I still miss her sometimes. That's okay. Missing her means you loved her. And love doesn't end just because people leave. It just changes shape. Julian glanced at Sarah, at Margaret, at everyone gathered. But I don't think she'd want you to miss out on all the love that's here now. The family we built. The life we're living. I know. And I don't. Luke looked up, his smile genuine. I'm actually really happy, Dad.
Like most of the time.
Is that okay? To be happy even though she's gone. That's more than okay. That's exactly what she'd want. They stood together, father and son, watching their family and community celebrate new beginnings. In the distance, Sarah waved them over. Pictures needed to be taken, speeches needed to be given, a life needed to be lived. As they walked toward her, Luke slipped his hand into Julian's with the casual trust of a child who knew he was safe, who knew he was loved, who'd finally found home. Hey, Dad. Yeah, Luke? Thanks for not sending me away that day, when I was hiding in your car. Julian stopped, knelt down so they were eye level. Thank you for being brave enough to hide there in the first place. For giving me a chance to be better. For teaching me what actually matters. Luke grinned, that same fierce, beautiful smile that had first cracked Julian's armor 6 months into their journey. We're pretty good at saving each other, huh?
The best.
They rejoined the celebration, and Julian caught his reflection in the community center's glass doors, a man transformed. Not by money or power or success, but by love. By a 7-year-old boy with a dying teddy bear who'd appeared in his back seat and refused to let him stay broken. The boy in the back seat had changed everything. And in saving him, Julian had finally saved himself. Epilogue. 5 years later. Luke Skywalker Corleone, age 15, stood at the podium of his high school's community service awards ceremony, accepting recognition for his work with foster youth advocacy. People always ask me why I care so much about kids in the system, he said, his voice steady and strong. And I tell them it's because I was one of them. I was the kid nobody wanted. The one who'd been through 5 homes in 2 years. The one everyone said was too broken to fix. He paused, found his dad in the audience, grayer now but smiling with unconditional pride. Beside him, Sarah held 4-year-old Emily, who was trying very hard to sit still. Margaret and her husband sat in the row behind, recording everything on their phones. But then someone saw past the broken parts. Someone took a chance on a scared kid with a stuffed bear and too many nightmares. And he taught me that families aren't just born, they're built. By people who choose each other. Who show up even when it's hard. Who believe that everyone deserves a home. Luke's eyes found Julian's again. My dad once told me that I saved him. But the truth is, we saved each other. And that's what I want for every kid in foster care, someone who sees them, really sees them, and chooses them anyway. The audience erupted in applause. Julian was crying openly, not caring who saw. Sarah was crying. Margaret was crying. Even Chun, in the back row, was wiping his eyes. After the ceremony, Luke found Julian outside, looking up at the stars. Proud of you, son, Julian said quietly. Learn from the best. Luke stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder now, almost as tall as his dad. You know what I was thinking about up there? That day in your car. How scared I was. How certain I was that you'd just call the cops and send me away. Best decision I never planned to make. Same. Luke smiled. Think about how different everything would be if I'd hidden in someone else's car. Let's not. That's too terrifying to contemplate. They stood in comfortable silence, father and son, watching the stars over Manhattan, the same stars that had hung over a frightened boy and a broken man the night everything changed.
Dad.
Luke's voice was soft. I'm writing my college essays. And I wanted to write about you. About us. Is that okay? Julian's throat closed. You're applying to colleges already?
I am 15.
It's not that far away. Luke's expression turned mischievous. Don't worry. You're not getting rid of me that easy. I'm thinking NYU. Close enough to visit home for dinner. Home. Julian tested the word, still amazed by how natural it sounded.
Yeah.
I like that plan. Good. Because someone needs to make sure you don't burn the pancakes. They laughed together, and Julian felt that familiar swell of gratitude for second chances, for unexpected families, for a boy brave enough to hide in a stranger's car and demand to be seen. The boy in the back seat had become a remarkable young man, and the billionaire who nearly destroyed him had become a father. They'd both become exactly who they needed to be, together. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel. We have so many more stories of hope, redemption, and love to share. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment from Luke and Julian's story. And remember, we're all just broken pieces learning to become whole. Sometimes all it takes is someone brave enough to choose us. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Keep believing in love. Keep believing that everyone deserves a home. Red Heart ***.